Hi, someone said I should make a tutorial for SpecOps by Unfiltered Audio, so I said okay. So let's run through it. I've written some notes to read off, so I apologize if it's a bit dry or robotic. But anyway, we have three main sections to start off with: the input and analysis stage, the processing stage in the middle, and then the output stage at the end. Up here we have a visual section that will display what's going on with the left and right channels. Low frequencies are on the left, high frequencies are on the right. I'm using a simple saw wave for this demonstration. You'll see we can do a lot with very little. We also have the modulation section down here. I'll get to that later. So first off, we have input gain, which is just a simple multiplier. Gain staging is very important with SpecOps, so you might need to adjust this a lot when you're working with it. Next, we have FFT size. This determines the number of samples the FFT analyzer is working with and how many bins the audio is split into. This converts the audio from time domain to frequency domain. Lower values will react to transients and dynamic content better. Higher values will analyze frequency content more accurately, but also tends to smear things together. Lower values will also have lower latency and utilize CPU more consistently because it processes in batches. So smaller batches will it can work through them quicker, but large batches will have to kind of be done all at once, and you kind of get spikes in CPU usage with the higher numbers. I think somewhere in the middle is a good starting point, and what you choose here will have a pretty radical effect on the sound you get, so you'll want to mess around here and see what works with the processing and with the input sound you're using. Window will change the window type that the FFT analyzer uses. I'm not really sure what's going on behind the scenes with these, but they all sound quite different. So it's worth switching these up and just seeing what sounds best or what sounds worst if that's what you're going for. Speed is more like feedback, with 100% being sort of just normal operation. The lower values kind of bleed past windows into the present windows, and maybe we can demonstrate it. Yeah, you can see it's kind of makes things fade in and out, and obviously that's going to be a lot more noticeable with a more dynamic sound. This is just a simple saw wave, so it's not the best for demonstration, but I think you get the idea. So once things have run through this sort of analysis stage, we get to geometry, which once we've moved things into bins, we can sort of manipulate those bins. We have P shift, which stands for pitch shift, and it's just a very simple quantized pitch shifter. And again, this is sounds a bit funny. Sounds a bit funny. Sometimes it sounds a bit more normal, but I mean, you're not trying to get normal with this plugin, so it's okay. Next, we have slide, which is sort of like frequency shifting, but what it does is it kind of just moves the bin to the next bin one at a time. You can hear that it kind of has a quantized. It'll be more obvious at low FFT sizes. You can hear it steps up to the next bin. Stretch is a similar kind of thing, except we start from 0 hertz and we're sort of stretching out our bins across in a relative way. So you can see it best in the visual display. Hopefully that's like enough to understand what's going on. And if we move slide up or down, that beginning point will change. if you stretch it backwards, it's kind of stretching from the topmost value. And I think if we pause down that topmost value, yeah, I mean it's doing things you're gonna be like figuring it out with your ears, not with your eyes anyway. But these parameters are really nice to modulate. You get some pretty nice sounds. So that's a pretty fun little starting point. After geometry, we have the effects section, and this is the general sort of order in which things get processed. Down here, through here, up here, out there. And I'm not going to go through all the effects because there's an awful lot of them, and it's best to kind of just explore them and figure them out on your own. But what we have here is the amount, and this is not really a mix knob. It's kind of depends what effects you choose, how this works. Like the MP3, if you can hear it sort of like, it's not like a mix knob, it's like an intensity. We have the start, which this determines the lowest bin that the effect will be working. So every bin after this line will be affected, or I think including on the line. And width determines how many bins are effective from the left. So that's how these three work, and that's pretty much all you need to know about effects. They work in serial, so it's top first, middle second, the one on the bottom is last. Once the bins all run through these effects, move on to the compander section. Also like different sort of ways to visualize the bins here. I just leave it on color. Sort of the most straightforward, I think, or at least the most interesting to look at. Next, we have the compander section, and this is not what would normally be called a compander. It's sort of a very specific thing. This is just a compressor that can also be an expander. For compression, you want to turn the ratio to the left. For expansion, you want to turn it to the right, which is sort of the opposite of how compressor normally works. Threshold, knee, attack, decay, these are all standard controls that you get on a compressor. So if you don't know what these do, then it might be worth like reading a guide for how compressors work, because it will explain it more thoroughly than I could. We have an auto gain compensation here. I'm not really sure exactly how it works behind the scenes, but it does a pretty good job of making sure things remain audible. I tend to just kind of leave that on. But yeah, I mean, with this on, it kind of gets a bit crazy when you go to extreme values here. Yeah, I mean, it gets a bit weird. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. You just need to kind of mess around. Each bin has its own compressor or expander. Every bin will individually be affected by the values here. So if the threshold is down, it'll be detecting the threshold for every bin. And if you have a very large bin size, you have a ton of compression going on. And this will be pretty crazy on your CPU. But yeah, it's fun. So mess around with it and see what happens. The mask is sort of like it smooths out the compression. So if you have one bin that's past the threshold and maybe it's getting smashed like this, it'll sort of bleed the volume attenuation to the neighboring bins. I think 100% it might smooth it out over the entire range, but I'm not sure. Pull it down to 0 and you'll get some crazy, sometimes you might get some resonances ringing out. You can smooth them out, mess around with it. This is very much just a happy accident machine, this plugin. It's not really good for surgical sound adjustments. It's for making some crazy things happen. And sometimes you just need to mess around. And so I think that pretty much covers all of the processing. And then we have the out section, which is just where everything gets converted back from frequency to time domain. We have a basic low pass filter. This will come in handy because sometimes you get some very harsh sounds. And the filter will help you tame those. Of course, you can modulate that. You're getting into the realm of subtractive synthesis, so that's always useful. The output gain knob is just the same as the input. This applies only to the wet signal, not to the dry signal. You can adjust this to taste and then mix it back in with the dry. And this will never affect the dry signal. That's how they should be. Last, but certainly not least, we have the modulation section. It's a little bit overwhelming, but it's all pretty straightforward. You have the amplitude, which is sort of like a global depth control, and you can make it go backwards or forwards, and it'll swap it around. Frequency is just how fast it's going, pretty standard. You can switch it to hertz or bars, and you have the phase, which is the starting position of the LFO. There are many different types of modulators to choose from. The step sequencer is very useful. Sort of like, for me, it's kind of the bread and butter. You can make it very rhythmic. Okay, let's go back to the sign. So there's a trigger here, and that will reset the LFO back to the starting phase position that you've set. And so you can sort of re-trigger this with another LFO. Once it hits sort of the maximum value, it'll cause this LFO to re-trigger. And this little section here is where you kind of hook it up to different parameters. There's also bipolar and unipolar. I think that covers everything. You can make it a little bit a bit smaller. You can make it smaller if you press that button, and that is going to be something you do a lot because this gets very crowded and busy. So let's hook things up and let's get an idea for how things sort of work. Okay, I lost my train of thought because the cat just interrupted me, and let's just do like a demonstration. Let's make a patch, and hopefully that will be useful. Just gonna stick with the simple saw wave, and so yeah, I don't know. Let's mess around and see if we can get something that sounds good. Um, all right, maybe we can like work on the gain. Yeah, maybe a bit less extreme. This might be like very drawn out. If you got what you need out of the video, feel free to leave it there. It helps to have the mix up. probably should have reset some of these settings. Okay, yeah, this is not the most pleasant sound that I've ever made. But I think it at least demonstrates the general functionality of this plugin. You can kind of get a feel for it. You can see that's triggering when it hits the topmost values. If I can like stop this from screeching. Yeah, it takes a lot of messing around to get something that sounds nice, but it can do some very crazy things. Yeah, I mean, would have been nice to make something a bit more enticing, but I think that at least demonstrates the general functionality of SpecOps. Just mess around till it sounds good. And be careful, put a limiter on it. And most of all, have fun.